And then we'll just kind of blast through this topic I want to talk about. And if people like it, great. And then we'll open it up if anybody's got just random questions or anything you want to chat about. Cool. So I figured we'd cover contracts and paperwork, which is interestingly enough, like fairly low attendance today. This is another one of those things that artists just don't understand how important it is. And so I kind of figured that might happen, but I still want to cover it because it is really important, especially if you're looking to freelance. Obviously, immediate disclaimer, I'm an artist, not a lawyer. Do your own research. This is basically what's worked for me anecdotally, and legal requirements are different in different countries. So if you, like these are for US, this is tailored for US specifically because most of the companies and clients that I work with are in the US. Um, so it does change a little bit. The biggest thing that I've seen change across different countries is like whether or not it needs to be in writing and what form that writing needs to be in. For example, there are some countries where like a verbal contract is technically still enforceable as long as it can be proven that it occurred. Um, or there are some countries where it has to be in a document, but others where like a Discord thread would count as written. So it does change a little bit from place to place. So double check that. And generally, when we're looking at contracts as artists, we want to kind of have to deal with the minimum possible legal stuff. But the goal is essentially we want to make sure that when we give our art to the client, that we are reasonably certain that we're going to get paid. And so that's kind of the approach that I take to contracts, where they're probably fairly enforceable from a legal standpoint. Actually, in the US, these are the specific requirements for enforceability. You have to have basically an offer from one party to another. There has to be an acceptance of that offer by the other party. There has to be consideration, which means something of value is going between the two parties, which is actually interesting. This is a US thing. It might be the case in other places, but I thought it was interesting at least. Technically, if I was just like donating time and I like made a contract where it's like, I will give you XYZ, that is actually not an enforceable contract because the value is not flowing both ways. So if you are wanting, like, if you're doing a contract where either there is, um, I can't even really think of a good example of this because rev share would still count. If for some reason, like they've promised to whatever, put your name on the thing or something, like something of value basically has to be exchanged. Um, Actually, in retrospect, I can't really think of any contract you'd work up where it's only going one way. But anyway, that's important. There has to be what's called a meeting of the minds. So the parties agree, the wording is clear and not obfuscated, and that can be kind of proven or argued in court. Both parties have consented to entering into the agreement, meaning like they're not being pressured to do it, and then it complies with any legal requirements of that jurisdiction. This can get obviously very wormholey, but when we're doing freelance contract work, oftentimes the ticket value is low enough that it's not realistically even worth taking to court if you didn't get paid, right? And so that's why I've always used napkin contracts, is because their purpose is like it is technically a legal document, but the main purpose is just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that there was a point in time that everybody agreed to that, because 99% of the time if there's a dispute as a freelancer, you're not going to be bringing in a lawyer and taking your client to court. You're going to be bringing up the contract with them on a call and be like, okay, here we agreed to this, like is there some reason that's changed, or like if they don't pay you, it's like, hey, I just want to remind you, like we have an agreement for net 30 payment or whatever, right? For the vast majority of the time it is not going to be a high enough value to actually take them to court, but it's good to have a paper trail in case for whatever reason that ever had to come up. But yeah, consider like when we're talking about these napkin contracts, for the vast majority of people that are using them, it's going to be used as a kind of touch base between you and your client. Very unlikely that you're ever going to really need to take it to court. Um, with that in mind, I wanted to share some examples of napkin contracts, and this is the actual text that I use for mine. I've got a simple one and a more involved one. These were with actual clients. I've scrubbed all of the relevant details, but I figured it would be most useful to see like what it actually looks like, because often it's easy for me to sit here and um, like say here's the components that need to be involved, right? But it's much more useful to say like here's the actual thing that was used. So I've scrubbed out all relevant information about like clients and projects here, but I have left in things that are not identifiable. So for example, here I was doing props, right? For different classes in a universe. So that doesn't have anything like specific to the client. So this is an example of a simple napkin contract. This is basically, I kind of copy pasta this type of setup, and then I just uh, change the wording on a per client basis. The other thing that's worth noting is these ideas of kind of napkin contracts is that they serve as just a baseline, and then you'll end up changing it quite a bit on a client to client basis. And what you plug into these different things is going to be dependent on like what you agree with your client. So, if you've been like, okay, cool, like however you talk to them about payment, then you're just filling this information in based on that. And usually the first conversation you'll have will be in a call or a Discord or something. Everybody's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. You hash out how that's all going to work. And then you're just basically writing that up in a format that makes sure everybody is totally clear and that you can refer back to later if there's any disagreements or like anybody's misremembering or anything like that. Okay, so you'll see a very similar. We're going to start with a simple one and then go into a more detailed one. You basically define who the contractor is and who the client is. You don't technically have to do this. You could just reuse the names every single time, but this allows me to template it out, so it's much faster to type this up and send it over as part of proposals. One of the things that I like to do, if I'm reasonably sure like that we've got terms kind of set, sometimes I will actually just fill out the template and send it along with the proposal with something along the lines of like, okay, great talking to you. I've worked up the proposal that you wanted, and if it sounds good, I also have a pre-signed contract here for you. This is the napkin contract I usually use. So if everything looks great, you can actually just send that right back to me and we can get started immediately. That's nice because it just is less back and forth and it's less red tape. If they know that they can basically stamp the signature and then not have to think about it anymore, it's easier to make that sale essentially. Okay, so this is me, Grant Roberts. Defined as contractor, will provide blah blah, whoever that is, known as client with, and then here you'll put like specific services. In this case, I was doing visual development and concept art. It is important that there's a date. It's also important to have a termination. So like, here's how it starts, and then your termination is how it ends. We'll just work down that. Um, General header for terms and conditions. And then scope is super duper important. This is what you're going to mostly end up talking about with your client when they're asking you to do like the 18th revision of something. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, we scoped this out with X number of iterations. Or if it's going to be like, if you suspect there might be a lot of iterations, you can always put as part of the terms, or whether it's as part of the, probably of the scope, you can literally just add in like, beyond X number of iterations, it'll be charged hourly at X rate. So you can really flex this to however you want. In this case, it was a very simple project. So it was like, cool, we're going to do Viz Dev for props for 6 total classes in the universe of their IP. That's going to include concept renders, iterations, and ideation for each of those props in accordance with, they had us, or this in this case, in accordance with my workflow. Telling them that they're going to get X number of like fully realized designs. They wanted a spread to kind of choose from. Oftentimes with concept art, you'll have, this is kind of a given, but it was important to this particular client that they were guaranteed to get at least that. So we just put it in here. And this is another nice thing about the napkin contracts. If there's any pain points that come up when you're talking with your client, you can just put it in there and it will actually like, it will give them relief to see it in writing. It's kind of just like a look, I've told you that I'm going to give you this, but now like here we have it in writing. So in this case, this is pretty normal for concept art. but it was important to them that they have it. And so in this case, I'm essentially promising color comps and then final concept sheets. This is where we talk about like where the rights go. Um, it is good to have this in here. This I talked in the last Ask an Art Director about all rights for limited purpose, and this is what that clause literally is. This is a copy pasta. So it's just basically granting and assign to the client the exclusive rights to publish, print, employ, and advertise or otherwise utilize the work exclusively in relation to blank, where blank is basically their IP or that specific project, and not in furtherance of any other purpose unless modified in writing and signed. And basically, this means that they can do literally whatever they want as long as it is related to that project. If they wanted to spin off a different IP or a different project or something else, then they would have to basically get it modified in writing, signed, and it gives me an opportunity to collect on those royalties if they wanted to do that. It also makes sure that you don't run into the issue where this is really big with like card artists, where they'll do work for like a card in a board game, and then that piece of art will be used over and over and over for a whole bunch of different games, and they don't see any of the revenue from any of that. This is not like required. There are some clients that don't like this, which makes sense. But generally, if a client wants me to scrub this, then it's like, yep, no problem. We'll do full rights transferred, but the price is going to go up. So it just gives you as the artist a little bit of like it gives you a potential chip later down the line at the bargaining table if you need it. And if you don't, great, because this shouldn't restrict them from doing anything reasonable with the art. It's important to put a little information about payment. So this basically is like, how much are you getting paid? When are you getting paid? How are you getting paid? What happens if they don't pay? You'll see a pretty concrete trend with all of this, which is that it's like obvious stuff just laid out intentionally. So in this case, let's see here. We did a flat rate quote. So we talked last time about kind of how to quote. So this was flat rate as a per project basis, and they wanted to split it out per class. They had 6 different classes that they need props designed for. So I gave them a per class rate with 3 to 4 designs each. And then this actually said 4. That got removed in my editing, but for a grand total of blank for all classes. And then it also tells about how the payment will work. So I will send them an invoice at whatever interval they want, or if they don't specify an interval, I'll send it after the delivery of the contracted services. And then they will pay me within here, this is like how they will pay me. With a grace period of 14 business days. You don't have to include a grace period, but when I'm working with smaller clients, I like to, because it just doesn't matter. As long as I receive the money at whatever point, it doesn't really matter. This makes it feel like less scary because it's not like, oh, pay me on the day you receive it or else, you know. And then it just says beyond this, payments are considered delinquent. And then here I have this non-payment and remedies thing. This, I'm going to be 100% honest. I really don't know how enforceable this is in court. It's probably not very enforceable. It is a copy pasta of an actual legal thing. I suspect that with this specific contract, it might not fly. But the point is actually not to use it in that way. This is more of just telling the client, "Hey, please pay me on time." So you could try it. Like if I ever had a client, I've never had a client not pay with this, or I've never had a client pay late either. If I ever did, I guess we could try it. But again, like the purpose of these, for the amount of this particular contract, like I would never take it to court because it's going to cost more than you would get back. So this is good to have. It's just kind of shows them that you're serious, and it's like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. So it just helps encourage them to pay on time, basically. Termination is important because it's like, okay, how do we get out of the contract? Like if I need to end it because they're a nightmare client, or if they need to end it because I'm not what they're looking for, how do we do that? You will see some different versions of termination. On the other one, I had a totally different way of terminating, but this one is a very simple one. So it's just written notice. And that in the jurisdiction that this particular one took place in could have been like a Discord message. So either of us just saying, hey, like, I think we need to wrap this up. Let's terminate the contract and go our separate ways. That would be enough. And then it basically says, okay, if that happens, then what do we do? Right. So on this case, when that happens, I would issue an invoice for any open work. So that's any completed work that I've already delivered that has not been paid. They will pay me within 7 days of that. And then this is actually not needed, but this is something I like to do, which is agreeing in good faith to the transfer of any relevant project files, including things like work in progress, PSDs, stuff like that. You don't actually have to have that in there, but my thought process is like, I don't need work in progress for a project I'm not working on. So I prefer to just give them literally everything, because then down the line, if they run into problems, there's no like, oh, do you have the PSD for XYZ? Because it's just like, nope, I gave you literally everything I have. This is personal preference. It'll probably change on a client to client basis, but in my case, I like to do this. And then I point it out, and because I like to hop on a call with them and go through the contract, especially with indies, because contracts are scary. And so this is just that assurance. It's like, look, if for whatever reason we have to go our separate ways, you can be guaranteed that you're going to get all of the work that I've done up to that point, like 100%. And then this is just good to have. Basically, this is just saying the contractor can't guarantee, so I can't guarantee that my work is fully error free. So I'm not liable to the client if like something happens as a result of error in the work. This is just kind of a butt covering. And then this second part of this. And in this case, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. Even advised of them in advance. This is basically like, if the client's wanting or doing something a little bit sketchy with the art, like I'll tell them, I'll be like, hey, that might not be a bad idea, that might not be a good idea. Like that, you might run into some legal issues there. But it's not up to me whether or not they do that. So this basically is just like, you guys do what you want, but I'm not held responsible for it. This is especially important if you're working with Web3 clients. Um, and then the last part of this is what's called a severability. It just means if a court were to find some part of this contract unlawful, void, or otherwise unenforceable, it doesn't mean that the whole entire thing is. It will just sever that part. You'll find this in pretty much every contract that you ever look at ever. And the wording is very consistent. This is a very well-known clause. And that's it. So when I sit down with this template, really the only stuff I'm changing is the scope of the project, the date and names, and the payment right here. And everything else just pretty much stays the same. So it makes it very, very quick to just work up. If they're like, hey, can you send me a contract or a freelance contract? If they ask for paperwork, if they ask for, can I get that in writing? It takes like 5 minutes. You've got your template and you just bing, 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 and it's done. And I'm happy to include this. I'm going to put a big fat disclaimer on it, but I'm happy to include this so you guys have access to it if you want to use it or spin it off or whatever. Just do your own research for whatever jurisdiction you're working in. But this is what I pretty much have always used. To take a look at a similar but different, this one was for a much larger project. So the wording and the structure is going to be the same, but you'll just see a lot more detail in the sections. So again, here's me, here's the client. Again, this is all exactly the same. So contractor will provide client with, and then in this case, this was actually kind of a combination art direction, design slash go-to artist kind of a thing. So this one is like, there's a lot of hats that I'm wearing, and so it has to be a lot more wordy about like what it is that I'm offering them. So in this case, yeah, management, visual development, game design, level design, organizational and administrative services. And some of a lot of the time, actually, I'll try to be like specific with these, but not like try to list every single thing that I'm going to do. So organizational and administrative services could mean a lot of different things. And that's kind of intentional because it leaves it open for whatever. Generally, project scope is where you get super specific, and this up here is your main kind of categories. Electronically signed, there's your date. And then here's the scope. So for this one, there's a lot more involved. So let's just dig through it. This is art direction. So defining a clear, cohesive vision for blank. This was basically their IP. Working closely with the founder and co-founder to get core concepts of that IP and a game that was set within that IP. Working close with other teams and team members, developing parts of the vision, making sure that there's clear communication across different teams to guide and motivate. This is all art direction stuff. Making sure that there's consistent quality to the game and the assets produced, making sure that they're creatively aligned to the various aspects of, again, this is going to be the IP in the game. This talks about like production priorities and timelines and scope and implementation of those guidelines, stuff like that. This is more like a concept art kind of a thing. So like, basically I'm going to make the vision and then I'm going to sell it to the teams and the management and make sure everybody's on board, making sure everybody's hyped up, making sure that I'm clearly representing the direction I want to go with the project to them. Organizing and tracking assets, the teams, their tasks, orchestration between teams, coordination with other artists to provide. Here, I did key concept art. So I was kind of filling like a blended art lead / art director role, which is not uncommon, especially when working with like mid-level or mid-sized studios. Red lines and overpainting, green lights as needed. And then in this case, this is another example of an addition for the client. They wanted to just guarantee that I was working a certain amount of time on their project. So I generally work more than this, but this is an example of like, great, I will just put it in there and then I'll point it out to them when we review it. So it's like, look, you guys had mentioned some concerns about ensuring that you get all like a full amount of time, like a whatever full time essentially from me. So I'm just putting in the contract to guarantee that. No skin off my back because I would be doing this anyway, but that way they don't have to worry about it. Here's that same exact rights transferal. This is no change between the two. Even though this is a much bigger project, there's much more involved. Same rights transferal. The only difference is that in this case, I gave it rights transferred in relation to both the overarching IP and the specific game within that IP. That's the only thing that changed here. So that means that they can, as long as it's within that IP, they can use it. This was a request from them because originally I had just given for the game and they had requested, hey, like, if we want to work within this IP, can we get that as well? And so that was a back and forth that we had. We adjusted the rates slightly and then I made sure that this read accordingly. Cool. This payment I was essentially like full-time contractor. So it wasn't broken down by project or by time, it was monthly. So there was a monthly amount that we agreed on, paid by direct deposit. We also talk a little bit, whenever you're working with longer periods of time, like instead of just weeks, we're talking about like months. It's usually good to get multiple payments. I like to do bi-monthly, or is that right? Bi-monthly, twice a month? Yeah. So in this case, it's the 15th and last day. This is like a normal payroll kind of schedule. And it actually aligned with their payroll, so it was fine. You can totally do it just like once a month, or I mean, you can change this however you want. For me, I don't like having that much open work at any given time because if I have it, every half month, I'm going to have advance notice if payments aren't coming through, and I can kind of pause work until we get that sorted. Let's see. This non-payment remedies is identical for all the reasons we talked about in the last one. And then in this case, because I am essentially a full-time contractor, they were a little worried about like, okay, well, what if you're sick or what if you have to do something else? So it was like, okay, great. Here's what'll happen. So in this case, we're talking about anything like technical difficulties. I work remotely only, and sometimes that's a sticking point for some clients because it's like, how can we guarantee that you're working, or how do we know if you're not, or what if the internet goes out, or whatever, right? So this covers all of that. Sickness, technical difficulties resulting in an inability to do duties, temporary leave, anything like that. Then I basically give a specific formula for that prorated amount. So it's just the monthly compensation divided by however many workdays are in that specific month. And then we times that by the number of missed workdays in that month. So this means if I miss whatever 5 days, it will take the monthly, we'll figure out what that breaks down to per day, and then we'll subtract that times 5. Let's see, corresponding to number of workdays missed. This is also, it does mention when working hours has not been compensated. So that means if I were to like work overtime the other 4 days of that week and then take the fifth off, technically that would be fine according to this, as long as it's within a 30-day period. It also defines workdays. This is a good thing whenever you're including terms that might be argued to be unclear, it just helps to define them. So we mentioned like workdays, right, in our formula. So like, well, what is a workday, right? So we lay out this is what a workday is. Monday through Friday in my time zone, not including U.S. public holidays. This is the sad life of being totally freelance, is you don't get the holidays off usually. um, this talks about, okay, well, what if there's a planned absence? What if it's not like sickness or technical difficulties or temporary leave, right? Like, what if it's something intentional? Okay, great. So I will tell them in advance via verbal or written means, and then the same deduction will apply. And then here's our termination. Again, since this is a bigger contract, there's more money involved, so it's more specific on what will happen exactly. The other thing is because we're working monthly, there could be up to a month of open work at the time of termination. So in this case, it's 30 days written notice because at the time that I was doing this contract, this was like my main gig because it's essentially a full-time contract. So I don't want to get dropped like spontaneously and then just be shit out of luck. So in this case, it's 30 days written notice, meaning if they were going to terminate me, then they have to tell me in advance. And then we figured out a prorated amount. This is the exact same thing as up here. So it's like if I work 15 days, then they'll pay me for 15 days. And then that's that same good faith clause. This is just, I always do this. It basically is just showing like, look, I will do my best to make sure that the transition is smooth. And this kind of in good faith means that it's like, I will do my best. I'm not guaranteeing that I will give every single file. It's just, I will, in good faith, do my best to give them absolutely everything. Same exact legal and severability, no change, and then signatures. So that's an example, and you can kind of see, I'm sure you're getting a vibe for like the structure, right? Same structure. This is a totally different payment set, a totally different set of types of work that we're doing, but we can use the exact same template. And so this is how I do pretty much all of my contract work when I'm freelancing. I just use this. And it just ensures I've never had a problem with like not getting paid. There have been a couple times where there were disputes about like what I actually agreed to do. And in that case, you can just go and look. You want to make sure that your scope of project is very specific, especially if you're anticipating a client that might be pushing for more. Because my personal policy is that like if it's not outlined in the scope and they're making an argument that they expected it, like generally I will just do it. I'm not technically obligated to, but I like to keep my clients happy and I like to not burn bridges. So I try to be very specific with my scope of project because then later on when they're like, oh, like we need you in on Saturday or whatever, and I don't want to be in on Saturday, and they're like, well, but you're being paid. It's like, well, okay, but I've worked 5 days this week, so or like, well, I didn't agree to do your payroll, or whatever. I don't know. Weird stuff comes up sometimes. So yeah, that's your basic structure for basic napkin contracts. I can include both of these if you guys like, and you're free to mess with them. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Is just like, okay, when a client asks for paperwork, what does that actually look like? Generally, the way that I'll keep these is I use Google Drive for my own personal like file organization. And I've got it just synced up so that there's certain folders on my computer that when I put files in there, it will automatically back up to Google Drive. And I actually back it up to a place called Backblaze as well. And so for each new client, they will get their own master folder. And within that master folder, the first folder that I make is called paperwork. And that's where any signed agreements that I have with that client goes, 100%. Then I never have to worry if they're like, hey, do you have a copy of the contract? And it's like 2 years down the road, I know that it's just in the paperwork folder in their main header. And yeah, I'll usually just export this as PDF. There's a lot of like DocuSign and online like electronic signing systems. So it's pretty easy. You just kind of click to denote where the signature is, where the name is, and where the date is. And as long as the contract here says it will be electronically signed, and then you're using, Adobe Sign or any of the like electronic signing programs, those programs will make sure that it's including all of the relevant details to make it legally enforceable. Again, at least in the US. So I think that's pretty much everything I had for you guys today. Do you have any questions on any of this before we open it up to just general art direction stuff?
Is there somewhere we can look at this? Like look at the file?
Yeah, I'm going to upload the file into the resources in the artwork house, and I will
Okay.
ping when it's there, if that works. Are you
Yeah,
talking
that
about
works.
like
Thank you.
this specific file or like these specific files?
Like yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
Whatever. Yeah.
yeah. What I'll
Thank you.
probably do is, let me think here. Yeah, I can upload these specific. I might try to like scrub it, do one that's like a clean one because it's going to be more useful if you don't have to go through and like remove my name from all of this. So what I'll
Yep.
probably do is keep the exact same structure, but just make it easy to edit. So if anybody else wants to use it, then you're not having to go through and clean it out first. So, but yes, I'll put that. You can have full access to this. I don't mind.
Awesome.
Any other questions? I see Styx is typing. How often do I encounter NDAs and how long do they usually last? That's a great question. Um, Let me think. It depends on the client. So I've done a lot of work in like the Web3 and crypto space, and that's pretty much always 100% NDA. I've also done work with like indie game studios, and those are usually not only are they rarely NDA, they're all often like share this with as many people as you can, please. So it really depends on the client. I would say of all the work that I've done, probably like 65 to 70% is NDA. I unfortunately I don't have a contract example with an NDA clause. I have put some in here before. Although generally clients will bring their own NDA. It's one of those things that like I don't know. It just it's like a safety net for them, I think. So usually they will actually bring their own NDA. There's only been one time where I've added the NDA clause into my contractor agreement. Doesn't matter to me either way. But yeah, usually they're like, well, we've got an NDA, we need you to sign. And yeah, I would say probably 70% of work-ish is under NDA. The only thing I'll double check for NDAs is like I like to share my work. I like to be able to have it for portfolios and stuff like that. And so if the client is asking for a very extensive NDA, meaning like absolutely nothing can be shown until the project is launched and the timeline for the project's like 5 years or something, that will sometimes be something that I will bring up in negotiations as a reason for either increased pay or something like that. Because I'm basically saying, look, like you have all of my time for this entire span, and during that time I will not be able to show any of the work that I'm doing to get other clients. And so as a result, like if you want me to sign like a 4 year or a 5 year or a 10 year NDA or something, like I'm willing to, but the rate's going to go up. And if you actually like if you don't want the rate to go up, that's cool too. Let's take a look at the NDA and I'll just talk with them and try to understand like what are they afraid of leaking? Is there a way that we can make it so that like, if certain elements of the art or of the logo or of the world are not shared, the others are fine, stuff like that. A lot of this stuff, you would be surprised how much is like just talking with a person and then putting the result in writing. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the vast majority of times NDAs are like almost impossible to enforce. So I respect all of my NDAs because it's just I like to keep good relationships with all of my clients. But you would be astonished, especially in the Web3 space, how many of those NDAs are like not even remotely legally enforceable. um, so hopefully that answers your question, Sticks. Oh, I guess that answered part of it. You also asked how long they usually last, and usually, if it's a very restrictive NDA, it will last until the project has launched or until that asset has been publicly shown by the client. So an example is like if I do promotional art for them and then they post it on their Twitter, that art is no longer under NDA because it's now publicly available. And so then it's fair license, fair game for me to list it on my stuff. But if I've done art that they haven't used, then can't show it, which is a bummer actually, because there's one project I did a lot of really cool stuff for, like an immense amount of world building, and it got canned. And in that particular case, the NDA was until it launches or until it's public. So I will probably never be able to show that art. But it's okay. That was another example where I got a slightly higher rate because they wanted a really restrictive NDA. So again, it's just an opportunity where you can make sure that it's fair. Um, cool. Any other questions on any of the contract stuff specifically before we just open it up? All right. Sounds good. Do we have any just general questions? So this is now like fair game for whatever. Art director questions can be about pretty much anything. If you want to see like what red lines are or what they look like, or if you've got portfolios that you want reviewed, if you've got projects you're working on that you want advice on, like the style or guidance, anything is fair game.
So after this, are we just gonna like work on stuff or?
Um, what do you mean?
Oh, for I was under the impression that we were gonna like work on art and show things and get some like advice or something. But
Definitely can. Yeah. So, no, it's great. So, for the event, it's mostly just if people have specific questions like that they want answers from me. But there's
okay.
absolutely nothing stopping you guys from hanging out on the call and working together. There's also, I don't know if you have, there should be a role somewhere that gives access to a study. Where'd it go?
Uh, art and photo studies.
No, right here. There's also a study room if you want somewhere quieter to sync up. Oh yeah, study role opt-in right here. So you can also go in the study room. But yeah, I mean if people want to work on work, that's fair game. Unfortunately, none of the stuff I have to work on is currently, again, talking about NDAs. None of it's stuff
No,
I can actually show.
that's
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's totally open if you guys want to do that.
Okay. I'm probably gonna switch over there actually, but it's completely locked for me. So
Oh, okay. Here, I'll give you the study role real quick. That's easy.
thank you.
Where's your rules? There
Yeah,
it
the
is.
study role opt-in is also locked. So
Okay, I'll need to figure, it looks like probably something somewhere is not set up correctly. Where is it? Study alerts? Hang on, I actually don't know how this is set up. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Maybe it's the study alerts wrong. I should probably update that actually. See if you can see it now. Try that.
no.
Okay, interesting. Might have to take a look at what's going on there. Um, yeah, I'll have to do that off of stream, but I'll make sure I'll make sure you get access to that in just a moment, Janie.
Okay,
Actually, here,
thank you.
let me just turn off the screen share and I can just solve it right now. Let's see what's going on here. Permissions. Yeah, study alerts should be correct.
Oh, the voice chat is unlocked now. Okay. Yeah,
Nice.
that's good. Actually worked. So.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great place. You'll see people up there sometimes. It's a place that newer members can't necessarily just pop in and out of. So it's usually very focused up there, like pretty focused work. I know occasionally people will also arrange like study groups and stuff. So you're welcome to use that room.
That's nice. Yay.
Um, cool. All right. If there's no other like art questions, overpaints, anything like that, then we can call it here for this week. And Styx had mentioned actually, yeah, you're still here, Styx. I like the copyright topic. So next week, for the Ask an Art Director thing, I think we'll go into that a little bit. Like, where is the actual best practice as far as copyright law. Like if I get an image off of Google and photobash it, like, you know, where's the line on that, right? So that's probably what we'll cover next week because I think that'd be a really useful topic.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much
No
for the
worries.
session. It was awesome. Very informative because I hate all this stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. I think most artists do, so I'm glad it was informative. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put the blanks like the templates in the resource library, and I will do a ping there as well when they're up. So
Awesome.
you'll be able to find them there. All right, guys.
Thank
Sounds like that's it. Thanks for hanging out. Much appreciated. And we will see you next week. Or if you end up coming to the Open Atelier, then it'll be not even quite a week. So, all right. Peace out, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.